Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are reading from Adi Lila, chapter 5. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhete girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Verse 37. Thus in the spiritual sky there are varieties of pastimes. Within the spiritual energy outside the Vaikuntha planets appears the impersonal reflection of light. Verse 38. That impersonal Brahman effulgence consists only of the effulgent rays of the Lord. Those fit for Sayujya liberation merge into that effulgence. Verse 39. Beyond the region of ignorance, the material cosmic manifestation, lies the realm of Siddhalok. The Siddhas reside there, absorbed in the bliss of Brahman. Demons killed by the Lord also attain that realm. Purport. Tamas means darkness. The material world is dark and beyond the material world is light. In other words, after passing through the entire material atmosphere, one can come to the luminous spiritual sky whose impersonal effulgence is known as Siddhalok. Mayavadi philosophers who aspire to merge with the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as demoniac persons who are killed by Krsna, such as Kamsa and Shishupal, enter the Brahman effulgence. Yogis who attain oneness through meditation according to the Patanjali Yoga system also reach Siddhalok. This is a verse from the Brahmand Puran. Verse 40. In that spiritual sky, on the four sides of Narayana are the second expansions of the quadruple expansions of Dwarka. Purport. Within the spiritual sky is a second manifestation of the quadruple forms of Dwarka from the abode of Krishna. Among these forms, which are all spiritual and immune to the material modes, Shri Baldev is represented as Mahasankarshan. The activities in the spiritual sky are manifested by the internal potency in pure spiritual existence. They expand in 6 transcendental opulences, which are all manifestations of Mahasankarshan, who is the ultimate reservoir and objective of all living entities. Although belonging to the marginal potency known as Jiva Shakti, the spiritual sparks known as the living entities are subjected to the conditions of material energy. It is because these sparks are related with both the internal and external potencies of the Lord that they are known as belonging to the marginal potency. Excuse me. In considering the quadruple forms of the absolute personality of Godhead known as Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha, the impersonalists headed by Shripad Shankaracharya have interpreted that the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra in a way suitable for the impersonalist school. To avoid the intrinsic import of such aphorisms, however, Srila Rupa Goswami, the leader of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, has properly replied to the impersonalists in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which is a natural commentary on the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra. In the Padma Puran, as quoted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, describes that in the spiritual sky there are 4 directions corresponding to east, west, north and south, in which Vasudev, Sankarshan, Aniruddha and Pradyumna are situated. The same forms are also situated in the spiritual sky. The Padma Puran also describes a place in the spiritual sky known as Vedvati Pura, where Vasudev resides. In Vishnu Loka, which is above Satya Loka, Sankarshan resides. Mahasankarshan is another name of Sankarshan. Pradyumna lives in Dwarkapura and Aniruddha lies on the eternal bed of Shesha, generally known as Anantashaya, on the island called Shvetadweep in the ocean of milk. Verse 41. Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha constitute the second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. Purports. Sripad Shankaracharya has misleadingly explained the quadruple form Chaturvyu in his interpretation of the 42nd aphorism of chapter 2 of the second khanda of the Vedanta Sutra, Utpatti Asambhavat, in verses 41 through 47 of this chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami answers Sripad Shankaracharya's misleading objections to the personal feature of the Absolute Truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is not like a material object that can be known by experimental knowledge or sense perception. In the Narad Pancharatra, this fact has been explained by Narayan himself to Lord Shiva, but Shankaracharya, the incarnation of Shiva under the order of Narayan, his master, had to mislead the monists who favor ultimate extinction. In the conditioned stage of existence, all living entities have four basic defects, of which one is the cheating propensity. Shankaracharya has carried this cheating propensity to the extreme to mislead the monists. Actually, the explanation of the quadruple forms in the Vedic literature cannot be understood by the speculation of the conditioned soul. The quadruple forms should therefore be accepted just as they are described. The authority of the Vedas is such that even if one does not understand something by his limited perception, he should accept the Vedic injunction and not create interpretations to suit his imperfect understanding. In his Sharirak Bhashya, however, Shankaracharya has increased the misunderstanding of the monist. The quadruple forms have a spiritual existence that can be realized in Vasudev Sattva, which is the Shuddha Sattva or unqualified goodness, which accompanies complete absorption in the understanding of Vasudev. The quadruple forms, who are full in the six opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are the enjoyers of the internal potency. Thinking the Absolute Personality of Godhead to be poverty-stricken or to have no potency, or in other words, to be impotent, is simply rascaldom. This rascaldom is the profession of the conditioned soul, and it increases his bewilderment. One who cannot understand the distinctions between the spiritual world and the material world has no qualification to examine or know the situation of the transcendental quadruple forms. In his commentary on Vedanta Sutra 2.2.42 to 45, His Holiness Sripad Shankaracharya has made a futile attempt to nullify the existence of these quadruple forms in the spiritual world. Shankaracharya says in Sutra 42 that devotees think that Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudev Shri Krishna to be one, to be free from material qualities and have a transcendental body full of bliss and eternal existence. He is the ultimate goal of the devotees who believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself into four other eternal transcendental forms: Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Anirudh. From Vasudev, who is the primary expansion, comes Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Anirudh in that order. Another name of Vasudev is Paramatma, another name of Sankarshan is Jiva, the living entity, another name of Pradyumna is mind, and another name of Anirudh is Ahankar, which is false ego. Among these expansions, Vasudev is considered the origin of the material nature. Therefore, Shankaracharya says that Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Anirudh must be creations of that original cause. Great souls assert that Narayan, who is known as Paramatma or Supersoul, is beyond material nature, and this is in accordance with the statements of the Vedic literature. Mayavadis also agree that Narayan can expand himself in various forms. Shankar says that he does not attempt to argue that portion of the devotee's understanding, but he must protest the idea that Sankarshan is produced from Vasudev. Pradyumna is produced from Sankarshan and Aniruddha is produced from Pradyumna, and Aniruddha is produced from Pradyumna. For if Sankarshan is understood to represent the living entities created from the body of Vasudev, the living entities would have to be non-eternal. The living entities are supposed to be freed from material contamination by engaging in prolonged temple worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, reading Vedic literature, and performing yoga and pious activities to attain the Supreme Lord. But if the living entities had been created from material nature, at a certain point they would be non-eternal and would have no chance to be liberated and associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When a cause is nullified, its results are nullified. In the second chapter of Vedanta Sutra, second Khanda, Acharya Ved Vyas has also refuted the conception that the living beings were ever born Natma Shruter Nityavacha Chatabhya. Because there is no creation for the living entities, they must be eternal. Shankaracharya says in Sutra 43 that devotees think that Pradyumna, who is considered to represent the senses, has sprung from Sankarshan, who is considered to represent the living entities, but we cannot actually experience that a person can produce senses. Devotees also say that from Pradyumna has sprung Aniruddha, who is considered to represent the ego, but Shankaracharya says that unless the devotees can show how ego and the means of knowledge can generate from a person, such an explanation of the Vedanta Sutra cannot be accepted, for no other philosophers accept the sutras in that way. Shankaracharya also says, Sutra 44, that he cannot accept the devotee's idea that Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha are equally as powerful as the absolute personality of Godhead, full in the six opulences of knowledge, wealth, strength, fame, beauty and renunciation, and free from the flaw of generation at a certain point. Even if they are full expansions, the flaw of generation remains. Asudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha, being distinct individual persons, cannot be one. Therefore, if they are accepted as absolute, full and equal, there would have to be many personalities of Godhead. But there is no need to accept that there are many personalities of Godhead, because acceptance of one omnipotent God is sufficient for all purposes. The acceptance of more than one God is contradictory to the conclusion that Lord Vasudeva, the absolute personality of Godhead, is one without a second. Even if we agree to accept that the quadruple forms of Godhead are all identical, we cannot avoid the incongruous flaw of non-eternity. Unless we accept that there are some differences among the personalities, there is no meaning to the idea that Sankarshan is an expansion of Vasudeva, Pradyumna is an expansion of Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is an expansion of Pradyumna. There must be a distinction between cause and effect. For example, a pot is distinct from the earth from which it is made, and therefore we can ascertain that the earth is the cause and the pot is the effect. Without such distinctions, there is no meaning to cause and effect. Furthermore, the followers of the Pancharatric principles do not accept any differences in knowledge and qualities between Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha. The devotees accept all these expansions to be one, but why should they restrict oneness to these quadruple expansions? Certainly we should not do so, for all living entities from Brahma to the insignificant ant are expansions of Vasudeva, as accepted in all the Shrutis and Smritis. Shankaracharya also says in Sutra 45 that the devotees who follow the Pancharatra state that God's qualities and God himself as the owner of the qualities are the same. But how can Bhagavad school state that the six opulences, wisdom, wealth, strength, fame, beauty and renunciation are identical with the Lord Vasudeva? This is impossible. In his Laghu Bhagavatamrita Purva 5.165 to 193, Srila Rupa Goswami has refuted the charges directed against the devotees by Sripad Shankaracharya regarding their explanation of the quadruple forms Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Aniruddha. Rupa Goswami says that these four expansions of Narayan are present in the spiritual sky, where they are famous as Mahavastha. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipped within the heart by meditation, because he is the predominating deity of the heart, as explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 4.3.23. Sankarshan, the second expansion, is Vasudeva's personal expansion for pastimes, and since he is the reservoir of all living entities, he is sometimes called Jiva. The beauty of Sankarshan is greater than that of the innumerable full moons radiating light beams. He is worshipable as the principle of ego. He has invested Anantadev with all the potencies of sustenance for the dissolution of the creation. He also exhibits himself as the supersoul in Rudra, in Adharma, the personality of irreligion, in Sarpa, the snakes, in Antaka, Yamraj, the lord of death, and in the demons. Pradyumna, the third manifestation, appears from Sankarshan. Those who are especially intelligent worship this Pradyumna expansion of Sankarshan as the principle of the intelligence. The goddess of fortune always chants the glories of Pradyumna in the place known as Ilavrit Varsha, and she always serves him with great devotion. His complexion appears sometimes golden and sometimes bluish, like the new monsoon clouds in the sky. He is the origin of the creation of the material world, and he has invested his creative principle in Cupid. It is by his direction only that all men and demigods and other living entities function with the energy for regeneration. Aniruddha, the fourth of the quadruple expansions, is worshipped by great sages and psychologists as the principle of the mind. His complexion is similar to the bluish hue of a blue cloud. He engages in the maintenance of the cosmic manifestation and is the supersoul of Dharma, the deity of religiosity. The Manus, the progenitors of mankind, and Devatas, demigods, the Moksha Dharma. Vedic scripture indicates that Pradyumna is the deity of the total mind, therefore, whereas Aniruddha is the deity of the total ego. But previous statements regarding the quadruple forms are confirmed in the Pancharatra Tantras in all respects. In the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Purv 5.86 to 100, there is a lucid explanation of the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, negating Shankaracharya's statements. The Mahavaraha Puran states, Sarve Nityas Shashvatas Cha Dehas Tasya Paratmanaha Hanopadana Rahita Naiva Prakriti Jaha Kvachit. All the varied expansions of the personality of Godhead are transcendental and eternal, and all of them repeatedly descend to all the different universes of the material creation. The bodies composed of eternity, bliss, and knowledge are everlasting. There is no chance of their decaying, for there are no creations of the material world. Their forms are concentrated with spiritual existence, always complete, with all spiritual qualities and devoid of material contamination. Confirming these statements, the Narad Pancharatra asserts, Manir yatha vibhagena nila pitadibhir yuta rupa bhedam avapnoti dhyan bhedat tatha chittaha. The infallible personality of Godhead can manifest his body in different ways according to different modes of worship, just as the Vaidurya gem can manifest itself in various colors such as blue and yellow. Each incarnation is distinct from all others. This is possible by the Lord's inconceivable potency, by which he can simultaneously represent himself as one, as various partial forms, and as the origin of these partial forms. Nothing is impossible for his inconceivable potencies. Krishna is one without a second, but he manifests himself in different bodies, as stated by Narada in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Chitram Bataydad Ekena Vapusha Yugapat Prithak Griheshu Dvi Ashta Sahasram Striya Eka Udavahat. It is wonderful indeed that one Krishna has simultaneously become different Krishnas in 16,000 palaces to accept 16,000 queens as his wife. Bhagavatam 10.69.2. The Padma Puran also explains, Sadevo Bahuda Bhutva Nirgunaha Purushottama Eki Bhuya Punaha Shete Nirdosho Harir Adikrit. The same personality of Godhead, Purushottam, the original person who is always devoid of material qualities and contamination, can exhibit himself in various forms and at the same time lie down in one form. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, Yajanti Twan Mayastvam Vaibahu Murti Eka Murtikam. O my Lord, although you manifest yourself in varieties of forms, you are one without a second. Therefore, pure devotees concentrate you and worship only you. Bhagavatam 10.40.7. In the Kurma Puran, it is said, Asthulash Chanunush Chaiva Sthulo Nush Chaiva Sarvatah Avarnaha Sarvatah Proktaha Shyamo Raktanta Lochanaha. The Lord is personal although impersonal. He is atomic although great, and he is blackish and has red eyes although he is colorless. By material calculation, all this may appear contradictory, but if we understand that Supreme Personality of Godhead has inconceivable potencies, we can accept these facts as eternally possible in him. In our condition, we cannot understand the spiritual activities and how they occur, but although they are inconceivable in the material context, we should not disregard such contradictory conceptions. Although it is apparently inconceivable, it is quite possible for the Absolute to reconcile all opposing elements. Srimad Bhagavatam establishes this in Canto 6.9.34 to 37. O my Lord, your transcendental pastimes and enjoyments all appear inconceivable because they are not limited by the causal and effective actions of material thought. You can do everything without performing bodily work. The Vedas say that the Absolute Truth has multifarious potencies and does not need to do anything personally. My dear Lord, you are entirely devoid of material qualities. Without anyone's help, you can create, maintain, and dissolve the entire qualitative material manifestation. Yet in all such activities, you do not change, you do not accept the results of your activities like ordinary demons and demigods who suffer or enjoy the reactions of their activities in the material world. Unaffected by the reactions of work, you eternally exist with your full spiritual potency, which we cannot fully understand. Because you are limited in your 6 opulences, no one can count your transcendental qualities. Philosophers and other thoughtful persons are overwhelmed by the contradictory manifestations of the physical world and the propositions of the logical arguments and judgments, because they are bewildered by word jugglery and distributed by different calculations of the scriptures. Their theories cannot touch you. You who are the ruler and controller of everyone and whose glories are beyond conception. Your inconceivable potency keeps you unattached to the mundane qualities, surpassing all conceptions of material contemplation. Your pure transcendental knowledge keeps you beyond all speculative processes. By your inconceivable potency, there is nothing contradictory in you. People may sometimes think of you as impersonal or personal, but you are one. Persons who are confused or bewildered, a rope may appear to manifest itself as different kinds of snakes. Or similar confused persons who are uncertain about you, you create various philosophical methods in pursuance of their uncertain positions. We should always remember the differences between spiritual and material actions. The Supreme Lord, being all spiritual, can perform any act without extraneous helps in the material world. If we want to manufacture an earthen pot, we need the ingredients, a machine, and a laborer. But we should not extend this idea to the actions of Supreme Lord, for he can create anything in a moment without that which appears necessary in our own conception. When Lord appears as an incarnation to fulfill a particular purpose, this does not indicate that he is unable to fulfill it without appearing. He can do anything simply by his will, by his causeless mercy. He appears to be independent upon his devotees. He appears as a son of Yashoda Mata, not because he is dependent on her, because he accepts such a role by his causeless mercy. Then when he appears for the protection of his devotees, he naturally accepts trials and tribulations on their behalf. So this purport is still a long way to finish, so we'll continue next time from here. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.